My sister slept with my husband and had his baby, and my whole family turned against me, but 3 years later, my unexpected revenge made them cry in fear. I am Megan, 31 years old. And 3 years ago, I had everything I thought I wanted: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a supportive family. Then I discovered my sister Stephanie sleeping with my husband, James. What hurt even more, my entire family took their side, calling me the problem. They never imagined that one day I would own the roof over their heads, or that I would have the power to make them pack their bags and leave. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Denver, Colorado. Our family was not wealthy, but we never struggled either. My parents, David and Linda, owned a small retail store selling handcrafted furniture and home decor items. Our life was comfortable, predictable, and generally happy, except for one persistent undercurrent that defined my childhood: my relationship with my younger sister Stephanie. Stephanie was born when I was 3 years old. From my earliest memories, there was always something about our family dynamic that felt unbalanced. Stephanie was the baby of the family, the one with the big blue eyes and golden curls that had strangers stopping my mother in the grocery store to comment on her beauty. I was the responsible one, the practical one, the one who did well in school without drawing attention to myself. As we grew older, Stephanie developed a competitive streak toward me that our parents never addressed. If I made the honor roll, Stephanie needed to make the high honor roll. If I won second place in a competition, Stephanie would enter the next year and not rest until she won first. What bothered me most was not her competitiveness, but how my parents encouraged it. They called it healthy sibling rivalry, but it felt more like they enjoyed watching Stephanie try to outshine me. Despite this dynamic, I focused on building my own life. I studied marketing at Colorado State University and landed an entry-level position at a small tech startup in Denver immediately after graduation. I worked hard, put in extra hours, and slowly climbed the corporate ladder. By the time I was 27, I had been promoted to marketing director at Nexus Technologies, a growing company specializing in customer relationship management software. It was during this time of professional growth that I met James. I still remember that evening with perfect clarity. My college roommate Brooke was hosting a housewarming party for her new condo. I almost did not go because I had a major campaign launching the following Monday, but Brooke insisted I needed a break. The moment I walked into her living room, I spotted him talking animatedly near the kitchen island. James Mason stood 6 feet tall with dark brown hair that had just the right amount of wave to it. He wore glasses that somehow made his green eyes look even more intense. He was gesturing with his hands as he explained something about architectural design to a small group of captivated listeners. I am not sure if it was love at first sight, but it was definitely interest at first sight. We ended up talking for hours that night, long after most guests had left. He was an architectural engineer working on commercial buildings, passionate about sustainable design and creating spaces that served communities. I found myself telling him about marketing strategies and consumer psychology, topics that usually made my date's eyes glaze over. Instead, James asked insightful questions and shared how understanding user experience informed his designs. Our courtship was not without challenges. 6 months into our relationship, James was offered a prestigious position with an architectural firm in Seattle. We spent 3 agonizing weeks discussing long-distance options before he turned it down to stay in Denver. 8 months later, I was being considered for a promotion that would require extensive travel. James supported me fully, helping me prepare for interviews and celebrating when I got the position. After 2 years of dating, James proposed during a weekend trip to Aspen. We were hiking at Maroon Bells, and when we reached a particularly stunning viewpoint of the lake, he dropped to one knee. The ring had belonged to his grandmother, a simple but elegant diamond that meant more to me than any expensive new purchase could have. Our wedding was held at a rustic venue in the mountains outside Denver. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful. Stephanie was my maid of honor, though she accepted the role with obvious reluctance. Looking back, I should have noticed the way she watched James during the ceremony or how she managed to be in almost every photo with him at the reception. At the time, I was too happy to see these warning signs. The first 2 years of our marriage were everything I had hoped for. We bought a small but nice house in a developing neighborhood. We took weekend trips whenever our schedules allowed. We discussed having children someday, but agreed to establish our careers first. James was working toward becoming a partner at his firm, and I was continuing to climb the corporate ladder at Nexus. My career was accelerating quickly. I had successfully led several major marketing campaigns that significantly increased our client base. My boss was increasingly relying on me for strategic decisions, and there was talk of another promotion on the horizon. This success came with longer hours and occasional business trips to meet with important clients or attend industry conferences. It was during this time that I first noticed subtle changes in James. He began to withdraw slightly, spending more time at his home office in the evenings rather than sitting with me in the living room as we used to do. When I asked if everything was okay, he would smile and say he was just tired or had a challenging project. I believed him because I wanted to, because trusting my husband came naturally. What I did not realize was that during this same period, Stephanie had moved to Denver after graduating from college. She had studied fashion merchandising and landed a job at an upscale boutique downtown. At first, I was happy to have my sister in the same city despite our complicated history. I thought perhaps as adults we could develop a healthier relationship. Stephanie began dropping by our house frequently, often when she knew I would be working late. She would text me photos of her and James having dinner, claiming she was keeping him company so he would not eat alone. I appreciated this, never suspecting there was anything sinister behind her sudden interest in being a caring sister. How blind I was, how trusting, how completely unprepared for what was coming. Our third wedding anniversary fell on a Wednesday in April. James and I had dinner reservations for the following Saturday, but I wanted to surprise him on the actual day. I had been traveling for work the previous week and knew he was not expecting me to make a big deal of the Wednesday itself. I carefully planned my surprise. I told my assistant I would be in meetings all afternoon and cleared my schedule. I left the office at 1:30 in the afternoon, stopped at our favorite bakery to pick up chocolate croissants, and then visited the wine shop for a bottle of the champagne we had toasted with at our wedding. I even bought him a small gift, a custom-designed compass with an inscription, "No matter where life takes us, I will always find my way home to you." The irony of that inscription would soon become painfully apparent. It was a beautiful spring day as I drove home, windows down, feeling excited about surprising my husband. Our anniversary had fallen during my business trip to Chicago, and I knew James had been disappointed that we could not be together on the day itself. This small surprise felt like a way to make it up to him, to show him that our marriage was still my priority despite my demanding job. I pulled into our driveway at just after 2:15 in the afternoon. I was surprised to see Stephanie's blue Honda parked on the street in front of our house. For a moment, I thought she might be helping James plan a surprise for me, and I felt a rush of affection for my sister. Perhaps she had matured after all. I quietly unlocked the front door, balancing the bakery box, champagne, and gift bag in my arms. I planned to call out and surprise them both, but as I stepped into the entryway, I heard sounds that made me freeze in place. Laughter from upstairs, then a sound I recognized immediately as the headboard of our bed hitting the wall. My body seemed to move on autopilot. I set down everything I was carrying on the entry table and moved silently up the stairs. With each step, the sounds became clearer, more unmistakable. I felt as though I were floating outside my body, watching myself approach my bedroom door, which was partially open. What I saw destroyed my world in an instant. There was my husband James and my sister Stephanie in our bed, in the bed where I slept every night, on the sheets I had washed just before leaving for my business trip. I must have made a sound because they both turned toward the door at the same moment. I will never forget the look on their faces. Shock, yes, but not nearly enough guilt, and something else in Stephanie's expression, something that looked horribly like triumph. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then they scrambled to cover themselves as I stood there, unable to speak, unable to process what I was seeing. James finally broke the silence. "This is not what it looks like." Even in my state of shock, I almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. "Really? Because it looks like you were having sex with my sister in our bed." Stephanie had the audacity to roll her eyes. "Well, what did you expect, Megan? You are never home." The casualness of her response told me everything I needed to know. This was not a one-time mistake. This was not a moment of weakness. This was an ongoing affair. How long? I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. They exchanged glances, and that silent communication between them hurt almost as much as catching them in the act. They had developed their own intimate language while betraying me. Does it matter? James asked, running a hand through his disheveled hair. 8 months, Stephanie answered at the same time. 8 months? I repeated. While I was working late to advance my career, while I was traveling to secure new clients, while I was building what I thought was our future, they had been betraying me for 8 months. That is 2/3 of a year. That is longer than some people date before getting engaged. James finally had the decency to look ashamed. Megan, I did not mean for this to happen, but you were always working, always distracted. I felt like I was living alone most of the time. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to sleep with my sister. Was that your solution? My shock was giving way to anger now, my voice rising with each word. Stephanie slipped out of bed, wrapping herself in my bathrobe. He needed someone who was actually there for him, Megan. Someone who made him a priority. And you decided that should be you. My own sister. I felt physically ill. A wave of nausea swept over me. It just happened, she said with a shrug. We did not plan it, but we connected in a way that you and James never did. I turned to James, the man I had loved and trusted completely. Is that true? Do you love her? He could not meet my eyes. Megan, it is complicated. I do care about Stephanie, but I care about you, too. That is not an answer, I said. But it is all I need to know. I turned and walked out of the room, down the stairs, past the anniversary surprises I had brought home. I grabbed my purse and car keys and left without looking back, despite James calling my name as I walked out the door. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind replaying those moments in excruciating detail. At some point, I realized I was dangerously low on gas and pulled into a station. It was there, sitting in my car while the tank filled, that the full impact hit me. I bent over the steering wheel and sobbed until I could barely breathe. Eventually, I checked into a hotel near downtown. I sat on the edge of the bed in the sterile room, staring at the wall. My phone showed 17 missed calls from James, but none from Stephanie. I also noticed several missed calls from my parents, which struck me as odd. How did they already know? I took a scalding hot shower, scrubbing my skin until it was red, as if I could somehow wash away what I had seen. I could not eat, could not sleep. I lay awake all night, my mind creating new, torturous images of James and Stephanie together, calculating all the times they must have been with each other while I was obliviously working or traveling. By morning, my phone showed more missed calls from my parents and a text from my mother that simply read, "We need to talk. Meet us at Denny's at 9 a.m. I assumed they had heard about the situation and wanted to comfort me. I was their daughter, after all. I needed my family now more than ever. How wrong I was. I arrived at Denny's at exactly 9 in the morning, exhausted and emotionally drained from the sleepless night. My parents were already seated in a booth near the back. As I approached, I noticed their stiff postures and tight expressions. Something felt off immediately, but I was too overwhelmed to properly process the warning signs. "Mom, Dad," I said as I slid into the booth across from them. I expected one of them to move next to me, to put an arm around me, to offer comfort. Neither moved. "Megan," my father said, his voice unusually formal. "We got a call from Stephanie last night. She was very upset." I stared at them in disbelief. Stephanie was upset. I caught her in bed with my husband yesterday, and she was upset. My mother glanced around nervously. "Lower your voice, please. We are in public." "I do not care where we are," I said, though I did lower my voice slightly. "Do you understand what happened? James and Stephanie have been having an affair for 8 months. 8 months of lying to my face, and you are concerned about her being upset." My father's expression hardened. "Stephanie told us everything, Megan. Everything." There was something in the way he emphasized everything that sent a chill down my spine. What exactly did she tell you? I asked cautiously. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She showed us these, she said, sliding the phone across the table. I looked down to see screenshots of text messages, apparently between James and me. In them, I was berating him, calling him worthless, threatening to leave him. There were references to me staying out all night, to business trips that were allegedly covers for my own affairs. These are fake, I said immediately. I never wrote any of this. Stephanie must have created these somehow. I felt sick again, realizing the extent of my sister's deception. Why would Stephanie make something like this up? My father asked. She also told us about the times she found James alone, how depressed he was because of how you treated him. How you were never home, always putting your career first. And that justifies them sleeping together? I was struggling to keep my composure. Dad, these messages are not real. I have never spoken to James that way. I have never cheated on him. I was working hard to build a future for us. There is more to a marriage than money, Megan, my mother said. James needed emotional support, a real partner. Stephanie said you would go days barely speaking to him. I could not believe what I was hearing. So you believe her? Your own daughter catches her husband cheating with her sister, and you take their side. We are not taking sides, my father insisted, though it was abundantly clear they had already chosen. But you have always been focused on your career above all else. We warned you when you took that promotion that it would put a strain on your marriage. So this is my fault. My voice cracked. James did not cheat because he is selfish or weak. He cheated because I worked hard at my job. Do not twist our words, my mother said. We are just trying to understand the whole situation. Relationships are complicated. There is nothing complicated about this situation, I said. My husband and my sister betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now you are somehow blaming me for it. My father's expression grew even sterner. We raised you better than this, Megan. Marriage requires sacrifice. Your grandmother used to say that a busy woman makes for a lonely husband. I could not believe he was quoting outdated sexist wisdom at me while my life was falling apart. Would you say the same thing if I were your son instead of your daughter? Would you tell a man that his career made his wife cheat? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances but did not answer the question. Stephanie has always been jealous of me, I said. She has always wanted what I have. Can you not see what she is doing? That is unfair, my mother replied. Stephanie has her own accomplishments. She is not jealous of you. I laughed bitterly. Mom, she is sleeping with my husband. What would you call that? Things happen, feelings develop, my father said dismissively. People do not always choose who they fall for. I stared at my parents, truly seeing them perhaps for the first time. You always favored her, I said quietly. My entire life you always took her side, made excuses for her. But I never thought you would do it for something like this. That is not true, my mother protested weakly. We love you both equally. No, you do not, I said. You never have. Our uncomfortable breakfast was interrupted by a text message alert on my phone. It was from my cousin Taylor, just heard the news about James and Stephanie. So happy for them. When is the baby due? I looked up from my phone in confusion. What baby? My parents exchanged another look, and I knew immediately that there was more. You did not know? My mother asked. Stephanie is pregnant, about 3 months along. The room seemed to spin around me. 3 months pregnant. That meant she had conceived while I was at a marketing conference in New York, an important event that James had encouraged me to attend. James is the father, I asked, though I already knew the answer. My father nodded. They told us last night they are keeping the baby. They want to be together, Megan. Maybe it is time to accept that and move on gracefully. Gracefully, I repeated, feeling as though I might scream or throw something. You want me to gracefully accept that my husband impregnated my sister while we were married? That they lied and sneaked around behind my back for months? That she is now carrying what should have been my child with my husband? Life does not always go as planned, my mother said, reaching across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. "I need to go," I said, sliding out of the booth. "I cannot do this right now. Megan, do not leave like this," my father called as I stood up. "Family sticks together during difficult times." I turned back to look at them. Apparently not my family. Over the next few weeks, the family betrayal deepened. Calls and texts from extended family members made it clear that Stephanie's version of events had spread far and wide. My Aunt Caroline called to tell me she was disappointed in how I had driven James away. My Uncle Philip suggested I should bow out gracefully and give Stephanie and James my blessing for the sake of the baby. Not a single family member reached out to offer me support or to ask for my side of the story. It was as if I had been erased, replaced by a villainous caricature who had neglected her husband to the point that he had no choice but to fall in love with her more attentive, more deserving sister. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown, taking only my personal belongings. I could not bear to fight over furniture and household items that would only remind me of my failed marriage and betrayal. James texted once to ask when I would collect my things, but I never responded. The isolation was complete. Family gatherings continued without me, while Stephanie and James were welcomed with open arms. Through social media posts I could not help but see, I learned that my parents were helping them prepare for the baby, that my mother was planning a baby shower, that my father was offering James a position in the family business since his architecture firm was downsizing. The betrayal cut so deep that there were days I could barely function. The family I had loved and trusted my entire life had abandoned me completely, choosing to believe the worst about me rather than question the convenient narrative spun by Stephanie and James. I was alone in a way I had never been before, completely, utterly alone. The months following the discovery of the affair and my family's betrayal were the darkest of my life. I moved through my days like a ghost, going through the motions at work but struggling to focus on tasks that had once energized me. My boss, Daniel, called me into his office after I missed an important deadline and gently asked if everything was all right. I burst into tears, something I had never done in a professional setting before. To his credit, Daniel was understanding. He offered me 2 weeks of personal leave to sort things out. I accepted gratefully, though I had no idea how to even begin sorting out the mess my life had become. The divorce proceedings were another layer of hell. James had hired an aggressive attorney who seemed determined to paint me as a cold, career-obsessed wife who had emotionally abandoned her husband. They attempted to hide assets, claiming that James had contributed more to our joint accounts than he actually had. My own attorney advised me to fight, but I was so emotionally drained that some days I considered just giving James whatever he wanted just to be done with it all. The most painful blow came when I learned that James had given Stephanie my grandmother's engagement ring, the one I had cherished and worn proudly for 3 years. When I requested its return through my attorney, citing its status as a family heirloom, James's lawyer responded that it was already being worn by its rightful owner. Even at work, where I had always found solace and purpose, things were deteriorating. Rumors had somehow spread about my personal situation. I would walk into the break room and conversations would suddenly stop. Colleagues who had once sought my advice now avoided eye contact in the hallways. I later learned that Stephanie's friend Danielle worked in our human resources department and had been sharing her version of my marital drama. One unexpected bright spot emerged during this dark time. Allison, a colleague from the creative department whom I had worked with but never been particularly close to, invited me to lunch one day. Over sandwiches at a small cafe near our office, she shared that she had gone through a similar experience years earlier when her fiancé had cheated with her best friend. "I know everyone is telling you to move on," she said. "But it is okay to be angry. It is okay to not be okay for a while." That simple acknowledgement of my feelings was the first real support I had received since my world fell apart. Allison did not offer empty platitudes or suggest I had somehow brought this on myself. She just listened and validated my pain. With Allison's encouragement, I finally made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Karen Miller, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. Our first few sessions were difficult. I resisted her attempts to explore my childhood, insisting that my current situation had nothing to do with my past. But gradually, as I began to trust her, I started to see the connections between my family's lifelong favoritism towards Stephanie and their willingness to believe the worst about me. You internalized the message that you had to earn love through achievement, Dr. Miller suggested during one particularly insightful session. While Stephanie was taught that she deserved love simply for existing, 6 months after discovering the affair, I hit another low point. My cousin Taylor posted photos from a family wedding I had not been invited to. There, smiling in the group family photo, were my parents, several aunts and uncles, cousins I had grown up with, James and Stephanie, her pregnancy now prominently visible in a form-fitting blue dress. They looked happy, united, as if I had never existed. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with a bottle of wine, scrolling through the photos and torturing myself with images of the family that had discarded me. I reached a breaking point where the pain was so intense I could barely breathe. I threw my phone across the room, watching as it hit the wall and fell to the floor. In that moment of absolute rock bottom, something shifted inside me. I was done being a victim, done letting Stephanie, James, and my family define my worth, done punishing myself for crimes I had not committed. I picked up my phone, thankfully still functioning, and deleted all my social media apps. Then I called Dr. Miller and left a message requesting an emergency session the following day. Finally, I opened my laptop and began researching job opportunities. If my family and former husband wanted to pretend I did not exist, perhaps it was time to reinvent myself completely. The next morning, I awoke with a clarity I had not felt in months. I showered, put on my most professional outfit, and went to work with a renewed sense of purpose. That afternoon, between meetings, I updated my resume and sent it to a recruiter who had contacted me months earlier about an opportunity one had previously dismissed. 2 days later, I received a call about a position as Vice President of Marketing at Apex Solutions, Nexus Technologies' main competitor. The salary was nearly double what I was currently making, and the role would give me significantly more authority and creative control. The catch: I would be directly competing against my former employer, potentially burning professional bridges in the process. After careful consideration and a lengthy discussion with Dr. Miller, I decided to interview for the position. The interview process was rigorous, involving 5 separate meetings with various executives and team members. I was more prepared and focused than I had ever been, channeling all my hurt and anger into determination to succeed. 3 weeks later, I received an offer. As I sat in my apartment staring at the formal letter with its impressive salary figure and comprehensive benefits package, I had to decide whether to stay in the city where my ex-husband and sister were building their new life together or to run away and start fresh somewhere else. In the end, I chose to stay. Running would feel too much like admitting defeat, like I was the one who had something to be ashamed of. Denver was my home, too. And perhaps there was a small, vindictive part of me that liked the idea of them potentially seeing me succeed while they were trapped in a relationship built on betrayal. I accepted the position at Apex Solutions and gave my notice at Nexus Technologies. My boss seemed genuinely sorry to lose me and offered a substantial counteroffer, but my mind was made up. It was time for a change, time to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I packed up my office on my final day, I found a card on my desk from Allison. Inside, she had written, "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." I later learned it was a quote from J.K. Rowling. But in that moment, it felt like a message meant specifically for me. Rock bottom was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. 1 year after discovering James and Stephanie's betrayal, my life looked dramatically different. My position as Vice President of Marketing at Apex Solutions had pushed me to grow in ways I never anticipated. I led a team of 15 talented professionals, and together we had launched a campaign that increased our market share by 17% in just 9 months, directly cutting into Nexus Technologies' customer base. Professionally, I was thriving. I had found that my work ethic, which James and my family had criticized as excessive, was valued and rewarded at Apex. The CEO, Victoria, had become something of a mentor to me, showing me that it was possible to be both successful and balanced, ambitious and well-rounded. Allison and I had grown closer, and through her, I had met other friends who formed a small but supportive social circle. We had movie nights, tried new restaurants, and occasionally went hiking in the mountains outside Denver. These were not deep lifelong friendships yet, but they were authentic connections that helped fill the void left by my family's betrayal. My therapy with Dr. Miller continued, though we had reduced sessions to twice monthly rather than weekly. We had worked through much of my initial trauma and were now focusing on rebuilding my sense of self-worth and establishing healthy boundaries. I had even reached a point where I could talk about James and Stephanie without feeling like I might shatter. "You have made remarkable progress," Dr. Miller told me during one session. "Many people would have let this kind of betrayal define them permanently." I had also dipped my toe back into the dating pool, though cautiously. I met Andrew, an engineering professor at the University of Colorado, through a dating app. We dated for 3 months, and while he was kind and intelligent, something did not quite click between us. Still, the experience showed me that I could trust again, that I could be vulnerable with someone new without constantly fearing betrayal. The end of our brief relationship was amicable, and I felt proud of myself for being able to recognize that he was not right for me rather than clinging to the relationship out of fear of being alone. That, too, represented growth. My financial situation had improved dramatically with my new position. My salary had nearly doubled, and I was receiving performance bonuses that allowed me to not only live comfortably but also to invest significantly. On the recommendation of a colleague, I began working with a financial advisor named Patricia who helped me develop an investment strategy focused on long-term growth. "You are in an excellent position to build real wealth," Patricia told me during one of our meetings. "Especially since you do not have the financial constraints that come with children or supporting extended family." It was during one of these financial planning sessions that I first learned about my family's financial troubles. Patricia mentioned a local retail business that was struggling due to economic downturns and increased competition from online retailers. "It reminds me of a furniture store I was looking at last week," she said. "Handcrafted items, family-owned for years, but they just cannot compete in the current market." My interest was immediately piqued. "Would it happen to be Mason Family Furnishings?" I asked, using the name my parents had adopted for their store after James joined the business. Patricia looked surprised. "Yes, actually." "Do you know them?" "I used to," I replied carefully. "What exactly is happening with the business?" She explained that the store had been struggling for months. The combination of economic downturn, poor management decisions, and increased competition had created a perfect storm. They were behind on their commercial lease and at risk of losing their retail space. I absorbed this information with mixed emotions. While I did not wish financial hardship on my parents, I could not help but feel a twinge of satisfaction that their decision to embrace James into the family business was not working out as planned. Through careful questioning that did not reveal my personal connection, I learned more over the following weeks. James had indeed lost his position at the architectural firm due to downsizing, and my father had brought him into the family business despite James having no experience in retail or furniture. His attempts to modernize the business had backfired, alienating longtime customers while failing to attract new ones. More surprisingly, I discovered through local business gossip that Stephanie, James, and their baby were living with my parents. They had apparently been unable to afford a place of their own between the failing business and the expenses of a new baby. I might have left it at that, a bit of schadenfreude to privately enjoy, if not for an unexpected opportunity that presented itself through Patricia's connections. She mentioned that a commercial real estate investment group was looking for additional investors for a portfolio that included the very building where my parents' store was located. "It is a good opportunity," Patricia explained. "The current owner is retiring and selling several properties as a package. Most have stable long-term tenants, though there are a couple of troubled leases in the mix." I found myself facing a moral crossroads. Should I invest in the building, potentially becoming my parents' landlord? Would that be taking my desire for vindication too far? I scheduled an extra session with Dr. Miller to discuss the situation. "What is your actual motivation here?" she asked. "Is it purely financial, or is there something else driving this interest?" I considered the question carefully. "Both," I finally admitted. "It seems like a sound investment opportunity. But yes, there is a part of me that likes the idea of them knowing I have succeeded despite their abandonment." Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. Revenge can be tempting, but it rarely brings the satisfaction we hope for. That said, making a good business decision is not the same as seeking revenge. The question is whether you can separate the two motivations. After much consideration, I decided to pursue the investment opportunity. I worked with an attorney to ensure my involvement was structured through an LLC that would not immediately reveal my identity. It was a significant financial commitment, but between my savings, bonus, and a small loan, I was able to buy into the investment group. 2 months later, I learned through the property management company that my parents' store was now 3 months behind on rent and the investment group was considering eviction proceedings. I also discovered something even more surprising. My parents had lost their home to foreclosure 8 months earlier and were now renting a house that was part of another property portfolio that was coming up for sale. The coincidence seemed almost too perfect to be real. The universe was offering me an opportunity that I had never sought out or even imagined possible. After consulting with financial advisors and attorneys, I made the decision to purchase the entire residential property portfolio that included my parents' rental house. Within the span of 1 year, I had gone from feeling powerless and abandoned to holding the literal keys to my family's home and business. The question now was what I would do with this unexpected power. 2 years after the day I discovered my husband and sister together, I sat in the office of my attorney, Martin Goldstein, reviewing the final paperwork for my latest real estate acquisition. The purchase of the residential property portfolio had been completed, and I was now the official owner of the house where my parents, James, Stephanie, and their baby lived. All the proper legal notices have been prepared, Martin assured me, sliding several documents across his polished desk. As the new owner, you have every right to terminate their lease with proper notice, which in Colorado is 21 days for a month-to-month rental agreement. I examined the eviction notice with its formal legal language. It felt surreal to see my parents' names listed as the tenants and my newly formed property management company as the landlord. And there is no way for them to contest this? I asked. Martin shook his head. Not successfully. They have no lease violations, but Colorado law allows property owners to terminate month-to-month tenancies with proper notice without providing cause. Your only obligation is to return their security deposit minus any damages within 30 days of them vacating the property. I took a deep breath. And what about the commercial property, the store? That is a different situation, Martin explained. They are in breach of their lease agreement due to non-payment of rent. You would be within your rights to proceed with immediate eviction, though courts generally grant commercial tenants some time to vacate. I had spent weeks considering my options. The coldly rational business decision would be to evict my parents from both properties as quickly as possible and find more reliable tenants. That would maximize my return on investment and minimize complications. But this was not just a business decision. As much as I had fantasized about revenge during my darkest days, now that I actually held this power, I felt the weight of responsibility that came with it. I want to deliver the residential notice myself, I said finally. And I want to speak with them about the store situation before moving forward with those proceedings. Martin raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that is wise? Given your history with these individuals, it might be better to maintain professional distance and allow the property management company to handle all communications. I am sure, I replied firmly. This needs to be done face to face. 2 days later, I drove to the house where my family now lived. It was in a modest neighborhood, significantly less impressive than my parents' former home or the house I had shared with James. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering my courage, the official notice in a folder on the passenger seat beside me. Finally, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. I could hear a baby crying inside, followed by hurried footsteps. The door opened to reveal Stephanie looking tired and frazzled, a baby on her hip. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in shock. "Megan," she gasped. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared behind her. "Who is it, Stephanie?" "Oh my God, may I come in?" I asked calmly. "I need to speak with everyone." They hesitated but stepped aside. I entered the house, noting the toys scattered across the living room floor, the laundry piled on the couch, the general air of chaos and stress that permeated the space. "James, Dad," my mother called, her voice tight with tension. "You need to come here right now." My father emerged from what appeared to be a home office, looking older than when I had last seen him. James followed a moment later from another room, stopping short when he saw me. "What is she doing here?" he asked, directing the question to Stephanie rather than to me. "I think that is my line," I replied coolly. "Considering this is now my house." Confused looks passed between them. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. I removed the notice from my folder and held it up. "I recently purchased the property portfolio that includes this house. I am here to formally notify you that I am terminating your month-to-month lease agreement. You have 21 days to vacate the premises." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the baby's soft babbling. I looked at the child properly for the first time, a little girl with James's green eyes and Stephanie's blonde hair. A wave of complex emotions washed over me, but I pushed them aside. This was not about the innocent child caught in the middle of adult betrayals. "This is a joke," James finally said. "You cannot do this." "I assure you I can," I replied. "Everything is legal and properly documented. I own this house now, and I am choosing to end your tenancy. But where are we supposed to go?" Stephanie cried, clutching her daughter closer. "We cannot afford another place right now." "That is not my problem," I said, though I felt a twinge of guilt at her obvious distress. "You had no concern for where I would go when you took my husband, when you all decided I was the villain in this story without even hearing my side." My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is how you get revenge, by making your own sister and her baby homeless. What kind of person have you become?" I met his gaze steadily. "I have become the person who had to rebuild her entire life alone after her family abandoned her. And as for revenge, if that were my goal, I would have sent a courier with this notice rather than delivering it myself." "Then why are you here?" my mother asked, tears forming in her eyes. "Because there is more we need to discuss," I said. "I also now own the building where your store is located." My father paled visibly. "You cannot evict us from both our home and our business. That would destroy us completely." "I could," I acknowledged. "You are 3 months behind on the commercial rent. Legally, I would be justified in beginning eviction proceedings immediately." "Please, Megan," Stephanie said, taking a step toward me. "I know we hurt you, but please do not punish everyone for what James and I did." I looked at my sister. The confidence and triumph I had seen in her expression 2 years ago were gone, replaced by exhaustion and fear. Whatever romantic notions she had harbored about stealing my husband had clearly collided with the harsh realities of raising a child in financial insecurity. "I am not here to punish anyone," I said finally. "I am here to set boundaries." I turned back to address all of them. "I have another property in my portfolio, a smaller 2-bedroom house in Lakewood. The rent is lower than what you are paying here. You can move there if you want, but it will be a strictly professional landlord-tenant relationship. No family discounts, no special treatment." They exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the offer. "And the store?" my father asked cautiously. "You will need to pay the back rent in full within 30 days, I said. After that, we can negotiate a new lease agreement with adjusted terms that might be more manageable for your current situation. But again, this will be strictly business." "Why would you do this?" James asked. "Why not just get rid of us completely?" I considered the question carefully. "Because despite everything, I am not like you. I do not take pleasure in seeing others suffer, even those who hurt me. But make no mistake, this is not forgiveness. This is me choosing to act with integrity regardless of how you treated me. We should be grateful, I suppose," my mother said, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "You should be realistic," I corrected her. "Your actions have consequences. I am offering you a path forward that is more generous than what you offered me when I needed support. You can take it or leave it." "We will take it," my father said quickly before anyone else could speak. "Thank you for not doing your worst." I nodded, then turned to leave. Stephanie followed me to the door, the baby still on her hip. "Megan," she said softly. For what it is worth, I am sorry. Truly sorry. I looked at my sister and her daughter. Is she happy? At least healthy? Stephanie seemed surprised by the question. Yes, her name is Lily. She is 15 months old now. I nodded. Good. Children should not suffer for their parents' mistakes. With that, I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. As I returned to my car, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no triumphant satisfaction, no sense that justice had been perfectly served. But there was something else, something that felt like the first real step toward true healing. The knowledge that I had faced my betrayers with dignity and strength without allowing their actions to fundamentally change who I was or what I stood for. I drove away from the house that contained so much of my past toward the future I was building for myself, a future that was entirely my own. 3 years after discovering my husband and sister's betrayal, my life had transformed completely. I had recently been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer at Apex Solutions, the youngest person to hold the position in the company's history. Our market share had grown to challenge even the largest competitors in the industry, and I had been featured in Business Week as one of the 40 under 40 marketing executives to watch. My personal life had found balance as well. I had met Ryan, a software engineer with a passion for rock climbing, through Allison's husband. What began as casual conversations at group gatherings had evolved into a deeply respectful relationship. Ryan knew my history and understood my initial hesitation to trust again. He never pushed, never demanded, but remained steadfastly present until I was ready to let my guard down. On a personal recommendation from Dr. Miller, I had also found a financial therapist who helped me navigate the complex emotions associated with my newfound wealth and financial power. Under her guidance, I had established clear boundaries between business decisions and emotional reactions, ensuring that my property dealings with my family remained professional rather than punitive. My parents, James and Stephanie, had moved into the smaller house I had offered them. They had also managed to pay the back rent on the store and negotiate a new lease with terms that reflected the current market realities. Our interactions remained strictly business, conducted primarily through property managers and formal communications. I had not seen any of them face to face since the day I delivered the eviction notice, until Stephanie texted asking to meet for coffee. After consulting with Dr. Miller, I agreed to see her alone. We met at a quiet cafe midway between our workplaces. Stephanie arrived first, and I spotted her sitting nervously at a corner table, checking her watch repeatedly. She looked up as I approached, and I noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I was not sure you would." "I almost did not," I admitted. "What did you want to talk about?" Stephanie took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize properly, not because I need something from you or because I am afraid of what you might do, but because I have had a lot of time to think about what I did, about the choices I made, and I am truly sorry, Megan." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. "Why now?" "It has been 3 years. Because it took me this long to really understand what I did to you," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "James and things have not been good between us for a while now." I felt a complex mix of emotions at this revelation but kept my expression neutral. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. "We are trying to make it work for Lily's sake," she trailed off, then shook her head. "That is not why I wanted to see you. I did not come here to complain about my relationship or to ask for sympathy. I came because I need you to know that I understand now how deeply I betrayed you. Not just by being with James, but by turning the family against you, by making you the villain when you were the victim." I took a sip of my coffee, using the moment to gather my thoughts. "I appreciate you saying that. It means something to hear it, even after all this time." "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. I considered the question seriously. "Forgiveness is a process, not an event," I said, echoing Dr. Miller's words. "I have let go of the anger that was consuming me. I no longer wake up thinking about what you and James did. In that sense, I have moved on. But trust is different from forgiveness, and I do not know if that can ever be rebuilt between us." Stephanie nodded, wiping at her eyes. I understand. I just hope that someday maybe we could have some kind of relationship again, even if it is never the same. I cannot make promises about that, I replied honestly. But I can tell you that I do not wish you ill. I hope you find peace and happiness, whatever that looks like for you. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the most painful topics, finding small moments of connection in shared childhood memories and updates about extended family members I had lost touch with. Before we parted, Stephanie asked if I would consider meeting Lily someday. She is your niece, she said, and she is innocent in all of this. I thought about the little girl with James's eyes. Yes, I said finally. I would like to meet her when the time is right. She should not grow up in the shadow of adult conflicts. The following week, I received a text from my mother asking if we could meet as well. This conversation was more difficult, filled with her attempts to justify past actions and minimize the hurt they had caused. But by the end, there was at least an acknowledgement that they had failed me when I needed them most. We should have listened to your side, she admitted. We should not have chosen so quickly. No, you should not have, I agreed. Family is supposed to be the people who believe in you when no one else does. My father was more resistant to reconciliation, his pride still bruised by his financial dependence on property I now owned. James avoided me entirely, which was a mutual preference. As for Lily, I began sending her birthday and Christmas gifts, beautiful books with messages of strength and independence inscribed inside. My sessions with Dr. Miller had decreased to monthly check-ins focused more on maintaining mental health than healing acute trauma. You have done remarkable work, she told me during one session. Many people never recover from the kind of betrayal you experienced. They remain stuck in bitterness or rush into similarly unhealthy relationships to prove their worth. I still have moments, I admitted, days when the hurt feels fresh again. That is normal, she assured me. Healing is not linear. But look at how you have transformed that pain into growth. You have built a career, a support network, a new relationship, and financial security. You have even found a way to maintain boundaries with your family without seeking revenge. Ryan and I had recently begun discussing marriage, approaching the topic with thoughtful consideration rather than rushed emotion. He had proposed during a sunset hike in the mountains, presenting me with a ring he had designed himself, something completely different from the family heirloom James had given me and then passed to my sister. I want this to be new, Ryan had said. Something that belongs only to our story, not to your past. My new home, purchased with my own money, reflected the life I had built for myself. It was not extravagant, but it was beautiful, filled with art and books and spaces for the people I now chose to call family, Allison and her husband, colleagues who had become friends, Ryan and his close-knit circle. As I reflected on the journey of the past 3 years, I realized that the greatest lesson had not been about betrayal at all, but about resilience, about the capacity we all have to rebuild from ashes, to find strength in ourselves when those we counted on fail us. About the families we create through choice rather than blood, and the boundaries we learn to establish to protect our peace. The pain of what James and Stephanie did would always be part of my story, as would my family's betrayal. But those chapters no longer defined me. They were simply parts of a much larger narrative, one that I was continuing to write on my own terms. I look back now and can honestly say that I am grateful for the life I have today, even if the path here was paved with heartbreak. So if you are going through something similar, if the people you trusted most have betrayed you in ways you never imagined possible, know this, you can survive it. More than that, you can thrive. You can build something new and beautiful from the wreckage. You can find strength you never knew you had.